You think you know Dumbledore? The wise, twinkly-eyed headmaster who always had a plan? Well, what if I told you that the same man who gave Harry Potter his first real home also raised him like a pig for slaughter? Yeah, that's not just fan theory. That's straight from the books. Behind every twinkle in his eye, there's a secret. Behind every act of kindness, a calculation. But does that make him a monster? Or a misunderstood genius who did what no one else could? Stick around, because we're about to uncover the truth about Albus Dumbledore. And it's not what you think. Some people lead with power, others with charm. Albus Dumbledore? He led with mystery, sass, and just enough confusion to make you really question your life choices after every conversation with him. From the moment he appeared in Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, standing in the middle of Privet Drive in a purple cloak, using a device called a deluminator, you knew. This wasn't just another wise old man with a beard. This was the wise old man with a beard. He wasn't just the headmaster of Hogwarts. He was the heart of the place. A walking paradox of twinkling eyes and painful wisdom, whimsical one-liners and heavy moral dilemmas. He could disarm a room with a joke about chamber music, then drop a truth bomb so heavy it echoed in your soul. Titles like Supreme Mugwump and Chief Warlock were just bureaucratic sprinkles on top of the real magic, his presence. It wasn't just what he knew, it was how he carried the burden of knowing. And oh, what burdens he carried. Dumbledore's past wasn't a polished tale of heroism. It was a slow-burning tragedy, painted with ambition, grief, and a complicated friendship with a certain Gellert Grindelwald. Before he became the mentor everyone respected, and sometimes feared a little, he was just a brilliant boy hungry for greatness. The problem? Greatness has a taste, and Dumbledore once let it linger too long. It all started with the death of his sister, Ariana, a duel gone wrong, a dream of a greater good shattered. That's when he realized that power, when held by someone who thinks they know what's best, can be a weapon far more dangerous than any wand. He stepped back, refused power. Refused the role of Minister for Magic not once, not twice, but repeatedly, because he knew just how easily he could lose himself in that throne. This guilt didn't fade with age. It matured with him. Every decision he made, every conversation he had with Harry, every lesson he offered with a smirk and a twinkle, it was all wrapped in that lingering sense of responsibility. He wasn't trying to be adored. He was trying to do penance. His compassion wasn't softness. It was a deliberate choice, forged through loss and self-control. Kindness, for him, was discipline in disguise. What made Dumbledore fascinating wasn't his invincibility. It was his restraint. This was a man who could probably vaporize half the ministry if he wanted, but instead, he'd rather talk to a teenager about love. That's not weakness. That's character. He made a daily habit of choosing empathy over dominance, and in a world that often solves problems with force, that made him revolutionary, but even revolutionaries carry shadows. And in Dumbledore's case, that shadow whispered constantly in his ear, what if you'd made different choices? What if you hadn't turned away from Grindelwald so late? What if Ariana were still alive? These questions didn't break him, but they sculpted him. And, in sculpting himself, he began shaping the future of the wizarding world, especially when one dark-haired boy with a lightning scar stepped into his life. In the grand chessboard of the Harry Potter saga, Dumbledore wasn't just a player. He was the one moving the pieces, carefully, strategically, and yes, sometimes a bit secretively. From the shadows of the headmaster's office, he orchestrated a resistance against the darkest wizard of all time. And no, not by shouting orders like a military general, but by whispering truths and planting seeds. Seeds that eventually would grow into something powerful enough to stop Voldemort. Let's talk about one of his most underrated genius moves, using love as a magical shield. When Voldemort tried to kill baby Harry, Dumbledore recognized something everyone else missed. Lily's sacrifice had created a bond deeper than any curse. So what did he do? He made sure that bond was reinforced by placing Harry with the Dursleys, who, let's be honest, weren't exactly poster children for nurturing. Still, the blood protection was stronger than their emotional damage, but that was just the beginning. Dumbledore didn't wait around for destiny to sort itself out. He trained it. He mentored Harry, gave him the invisibility cloak, and guided him through what was essentially a magical scavenger hunt across 7 books. Behind every dragon, every riddle, every deadly object, there was the gentle nudge of an old man with a half smile and a master plan. Except, with a lot more existential dread, Of course, you can't talk Dumbledore without mentioning that duel. The year? 1945. The opponent? Gellert Grindelwald, former friend turned global threat. The result? Dumbledore wins. World is saved, and Grindelwald is locked away in Nurmengard, where he can think about what he's done for the rest of eternity. It's the Wizarding World's version of We Were on a Break, except it ended with a wand fight instead of awkward silence. And while he was busy saving the world, he still made time for the weird stuff. He discovered the 12 uses of dragon's blood, worked in alchemy with Nicholas Flamel, yes, the guy with the Sorcerer's Stone, and according to his own words, he had a soft spot for chamber music and 10-pin bowling, because nothing says, greatest wizard alive, like knowing how to transfigure matter and hit a strike at the local alley. It's easy to see Dumbledore as a saint-like figure hovering over the story, but that's not quite accurate. He wasn't floating above the action. He was the action. His fingerprints are on every major turning point in the series, and he did it all not with brute force, but with influence, insight, and a maddening habit of being just cryptic enough to drive everyone a little crazy. The man played 4D chess while everyone else was still reading the rulebook. Yet with all his brilliance, all his accomplishments, there's one thing he never quite outran: his own past. It whispered through his decisions, laced his silence, and sometimes made him harder to understand. Because behind every move he made to protect Harry was a memory he couldn't forget. And sometimes, the greatest minds have the deepest regrets. It's easy to look at Dumbledore, beard flowing, eyes twinkling, and think, this guy's got it all figured out. But peel back the layers, and you'll find something deeply human, a man haunted by his own hunger for power. As a young wizard, Albus wasn't just talented, he was brilliant, magnetic even. And like many bright minds, he fell for the same old trap, the belief that he could fix the world, if only the world would hand him the reins. Back then, he met another rising star, Gellert Grindelwald. Together, they dreamed of reshaping the wizarding world, not with kindness and votes, but with domination, for the greater good of course. That phrase became their mantra, but it's just a fancy way of saying, we know better than everyone else. And while the teenage idealism sounds almost poetic, it carried a dangerous arrogance, one that eventually led to disaster. You see, the dream of power cost him something priceless, his sister Ariana. When Albus, Aberforth, and Gellert clashed in a three-way duel, a spell went wrong. Ariana was killed. No one knew whose wand delivered the fatal blow, but Dumbledore feared it might have been his. That single moment shattered him. From then on, power stopped being his goal and became his ghost. He turned down the position of Minister for Magic not once, but multiple times. Think about that. The most qualified wizard of the age, refusing the top job in the magical government. Why? Because he didn't trust himself with it. I was safer at Hogwarts, he tells Harry in Deathly Hallows, confessing that power remained his greatest temptation. So he surrounded himself with books, students, and lemon drops, rather than political influence. This fear of his own ambition didn't make him weak. It made him wise. He knew that unchecked power, even with good intentions, could rot a person from the inside out. So instead of grabbing the throne, he chose to guide others. He became a mentor, not a monarch. And ironically, that restraint gave him more influence than any official title could have offered. A lesson we could all use. Sometimes real strength is knowing when not to act. And yet, the guilt never left. When it came time to face Grindelwald, years later, Dumbledore hesitated. Not because he feared the duel. He was more than capable. But because he feared the truth. What if he had to face the fact that his own ambition had once fueled the world's greatest dark wizard? What if he had killed his sister? These questions clung to him like shadows, and for a long time they held him back. But when the time came, he didn't run. In 1945, Dumbledore finally confronted Grindelwald and defeated him. Not just with spells, but with the weight of his past pressing against every wand movement. That duel wasn't about glory. It was about redemption. And while victory brought peace to the world, it didn't erase the pain. Because some battles don't end with a win, they just change what kind of man you choose to be next. Let's face it, Dumbledore wasn't exactly a wide-open book. For a man who preached truth and loyalty, he had a suspicious habit of keeping people in the dark, especially when it came to Harry. Some fans don't just question his choices, they accuse him. They see a brilliant tactician pulling emotional, strings like he's composing some tragic opera, and the scene that often seals the deal? That haunting conversation with Snape in Deathly Hallows. It's the moment when Snape learns that Harry has to die. Not might, not could, has to. Snape is horrified, and who wouldn't be? But Dumbledore, ever calm, drops the line that still gives readers chills. You have kept him alive so that he can die at the proper moment? Oof. That's not exactly how you win Mentor of the Year. It sounds cold, calculated, even cruel. And yet, was it? Because here's the twist. Dumbledore didn't believe Harry would truly die. He knew, suspected at least, that only the part of Voldemort's soul inside Harry would be destroyed. Harry himself, protected by Lily's sacrifice and tethered to life through Voldemort's own blood, had a way out. But did Dumbledore say that? Not to Snape. Maybe because he didn't want Snape's loyalty shaken, or maybe because he couldn't guarantee it. Or maybe he simply couldn't bear to speak it aloud. There's also that strange detail. During this conversation, Dumbledore keeps his eyes shut, entirely shut. Now, is that because the weight of what he's asking is just too much to bear? Or is it because he's wary of Snape's legitimacy? Some fans argue that if Dumbledore had looked Snape in the eyes, the truth might have leaked. Others say he just didn't want Snape to see how much it hurt him. Either way, the moment is hauntingly quiet and devastatingly complex, and the secrecy didn't stop with Snape. In the Order of the Phoenix, Dumbledore handed out information like he was rationing chocolate during wartime. Everyone got just enough to do their part, and no more. Some would call that smart. Others would call it manipulative. After all, keeping people in the dark can lead to trust issues. Just ask Harry in Order of the Phoenix when he finds out how much Dumbledore didn't tell him. Spoiler alert, he wasn't thrilled. But here's the thing. Maybe Dumbledore saw the big picture in a way no one else could. Maybe he understood that knowledge is power, and power, well, we've already talked about what that does. Sharing. Everything with everyone could have made things worse, not better. He had to walk a tightrope between strategy and secrecy, between protecting people and using them. It's a terrible burden to bear, especially when lives are at stake. Still, it leaves us with uncomfortable questions. How far is too far in the name of the greater good? When does leadership become manipulation? Dumbledore wasn't twirling a mustache in the dark. He wasn't evil, but he was a master planner. And sometimes, those plans felt more like chess, moves than acts of love. The question is, does that make him a villain, or simply a deeply human hero? For all the strategies and secrecy, Dumbledore's relationship with Harry was never just a mission. There was something deeply personal there, an affection that grew with each passing year. Yes, he kept things from Harry. Yes, he tested him more than once. But he also watched over him like a parent who couldn't quite admit how much they cared. Dumbledore wasn't just guiding a hero. He was protecting a boy he genuinely loved. Remember the way he always gave Harry room to grow? He let him face trials, yes, but always with a safety net cleverly stitched into the background. From the Mirror of Erised in Philosopher's Stone to the Pensieve in Goblet of Fire, Dumbledore gave Harry pieces of the truth, puzzle pieces. Really, so that he could learn, not just be told. It was risky, but it was also the kind of trust that says, I believe in you, even without saying it out loud. And when Dumbledore did speak from the heart, oh, it hit hard. In Order of the USA. Phoenix, after Sirius's death, he finally admits, I cared about you too much. That line, that confession, it broke the distance between them. For 5 books, Dumbledore had held back, afraid that loving Harry might put him in greater danger. But in that moment, he finally lets it show. And that's not manipulation. That's a man regretting how much his love had cost. Even the way he set up Harry's final journey shows his belief in him. Dumbledore didn't expect Harry to walk into the forest blindly. He trusted that when the time came, Harry would choose to lay down his life, not because he had to, but because he understood why. And that's exactly what Harry did. Does it hurt? He asks in Deathly Hallows, just before facing Voldemort. Dying? Dumbledore's voice replies in the limbo scene, warm and soft. Not at all. That's not strategy. That's tenderness. His gift of the Resurrection Stone, hidden in the golden snitch, was more than just a clever move. It was comfort. A way for Harry to face death with his loved ones beside him. It's subtle, but powerful. The kind of thing a man does not because he must, but because he wants to ease the burden. That's love in action, disguised as strategy. Typical Dumbledore move. Emotional support wrapped in a magical riddle, Sure, he played the long game, but beneath the chessboard, there was a man who'd seen too much loss and didn't want Harry to suffer the same fate. He knew pain, he knew guilt, and he tried, imperfectly, to spare Harry from both. Maybe that's why his guidance wasn't always direct. He didn't want to force Harry. He wanted him to choose, to become, to own his destiny. There's a difference between control and trust. And at the end of it all, when Harry meets him again in that strange limbo between life and death, Dumbledore smiles, not as a commander, not as a strategist, but as someone who is proud. Proud of the boy who became a man, who made the hard choices, who loved even in the face of death. That moment was never about manipulation. It was the full circle of affection, quiet, steady, and deeply human. Let's face it, Dumbledore had a flair for the dramatic. If there was a chance to guide someone toward a noble act by gently nudging them into a corner, he'd take it. He didn't always spell things out. Actually, most of the time he didn't. But that doesn't necessarily make him a villain in a velvet robe. It makes him human, complex. A chess master who sometimes forgot the pieces had feelings. Now, was he manipulative? Oh, absolutely. Let's not pretend he didn't know exactly what he was doing when he dangled certain truths in front of people like breadcrumbs. Think of how he used Snape's undying love for Lily to protect Harry. That wasn't just strategy. It was emotional, leverage. And yet, it worked. Snape's loyalty became unshakable. Dumbledore knew the risks, but he also understood the power of a wounded heart when pointed toward redemption. Still, there's a difference between manipulation for gain and manipulation for good. Dumbledore rarely did anything for himself. His moves, however calculated, were aimed at protecting lives, preventing another war, or preparing someone to survive it. He played the long game not out of pride, but out of fear. Fear that too much, truth too soon could destroy the very people he was trying to save. Especially Harry. But did he cross the line? Honestly, maybe. Some fans can't forgive how long he let Harry wander in the dark, only lighting the path when it suited the plan. You knew all along, Harry accuses in Deathly Hallows, and he's right. Dumbledore did, and he chose to wait, because the moment had to be right, because Harry had to be ready. But oh boy, that doesn't mean it didn't sting. Let's not ignore the way he used guilt as fuel too, the way he let people carry burdens without showing them the bigger picture. Even in the Order of the Phoenix, he shared just enough to keep the gears moving, but not enough for anyone to truly understand what was happening. That's a risky way to lead. But it's also very Dumbledore, always playing the game 5 moves ahead, hoping the board holds together in the meantime. Yet even with all that, we never saw arrogance in him. Sadness, yes. Weariness, absolutely. You got the sense that every calculated decision weighed on him. He wasn't a puppet master smiling behind the curtain. He was an old man haunted by the ghosts of what could have been if he'd chosen differently in his youth. Maybe that's why he hesitated. Why he sometimes hid behind riddles and silence, because clarity came with consequences. So, was he a manipulator? Yes. Was he cold? Not at all. He was warm in the way a winter coat is warm. Thick, heavy, maybe a little scratchy, but it keeps you alive. Dumbledore wasn't perfect, but that's exactly what made him real. And perhaps that's why his story leads us to an even bigger question. What does it really mean to be good? Let's shift the spotlight from the character to the creator. J.K. Rowling didn't write Dumbledore as a flawless icon sitting on a moral pedestal. She made him complex on purpose. In her own words, he is the epitome of goodness. But not the sparkly unicorns and rainbows kind of good. No. Dumbledore's goodness is the kind that crawls out from under the wreckage of bad choices, dusts itself off, and chooses to do better anyway. Now that's not a Hallmark movie kind of message, it's gritty. Rowling knew that readers would trust Dumbledore not because he never failed, but because he did, and still walked the hard road of redemption. That's what separates him from characters like Voldemort, who leaned into power. Dumbledore turned away from it, painfully, regretfully. And that's where the real magic lies. Not in his wand, but in his choices. If you watched Fantastic Beasts, The Secrets of Dumbledore, there's a moment that's easy to miss but rich with meaning. The Killin bows to him. Not Harry, not Newt, him. And Killins, for those not fluent in magical creatures, don't just bow to anybody. They see into your soul and kneel only to the truly pure-hearted. That scene was Rowling's way of saying, yes, I I know he's made mistakes, but he is, at his core, good. That moment also serves as a kind of spiritual closure for Dumbledore. The man who once craved power enough to risk everything, his family, his friendships, even his own morality, is now bowed to by a creature that represents purity. That's not just redemption, that's poetic justice. And Rowling doesn't hand that out lightly in her universe. You earn it. Through loss, through sacrifice, through unwavering commitment to what's right. Some critics argue Rowling redeemed him too easily, that she glossed over the manipulations and the secrets. But anyone paying close attention knows that's not the case. She allowed him to sit with his guilt, to carry it quietly like an old photograph tucked in his coat. Dumbledore's sadness wasn't just for show, it was a result of knowing how easily he could have become the villain, and how close he came, and maybe that's why Rowling never gave him a fairy tale ending. No love interest, no peaceful retirement in the countryside. Instead, he dies on a cold tower, betrayed by a man he trusted, and orchestrating the next step of a war he won't live to see. Not very glamorous, is it? But deeply fitting. Because the greatest leaders don't always see the harvest, they just plant the seeds. So when Rowling calls Dumbledore the best of us, it's not because he never stumbled, it's because he did, and chose to stand back up. That's a model for us, too. Not perfection, but progress. Not shiny morality, but the kind you have to fight for. And if that doesn't make someone worthy of a second look, well, maybe we should take one more glance before the story ends. From the very first pages of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, Dumbledore walks in like someone who knows far more than he lets on, and probably finds the whole situation mildly amusing. He's calm while cats turn into witches, composed as a baby is left on a doorstep, and just casually fond of lemon drops. But underneath that twinkle in his eye, you could already sense it. This man carried weight. Not just responsibility, history, every ye. Word he speaks seems measured, almost like a man who's made enough mistakes to know when silence is wiser than advice. That's part of what made him magnetic. He wasn't throwing around spells just to show off. He listened, observed, and acted when it counted. And even then, often with hesitation, because he knew every action echoes, especially when you're in charge of a world full of wands and emotions. What makes Dumbledore stand out isn't just his genius or his magical resume, though let's be honest, it's quite the list. It's that he evolved. He went from an ambitious, power-hungry young man who dreamed of changing the world, even if it meant controlling it, to an older man who realized the greatest power is restraint. He didn't become wise by reading ancient scrolls. He became wise by confronting his darkest instincts and choosing better. That's what separates characters who are great from those who are good. Greatness impresses, goodness impacts. Dumbledore wasn't perfect. He was layered, contradictory, at times maddening, but that's precisely why people still debate his legacy. Was he a hero? A manipulator? A little of both? Maybe. But isn't that what real people are like too? Messy, brilliant, broken, trying their best? His legacy isn't just about defeating Dark Lords or discovering new magical uses for dragon blood. It's about how he used his final years. To mentor the next generation. To make sure that the battles he started wouldn't have to be fought again. He invested in Harry, in Snape, even in Draco in his own subtle way. Always shaping the outcome, one gentle nudge at a time. Like a chess master who wasn't trying to win, but to teach the game. And even though he's long gone by the end of the series, Dumbledore's presence lingers in every choice Harry makes. It's in the way Harry values loyalty over power. The way he shows mercy when it's hardest. The way he finally understands, painfully, why some truths must wait until we're strong enough to carry them. That's legacy. Not a statue, not a title, but transformation. So, if you're wondering whether Dumbledore was a hero, maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe the real question is this. Can someone who once wanted power more than anything become the very person who gives it up to protect others? Because if so, maybe there's hope for all of us to become something greater, one choice at a time. So, what do you think? Was Dumbledore a selfless protector or a brilliant manipulator playing wizard chess with real lives? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear your take. And hey, if you're into digging deeper into the hidden truths of the wizarding world, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a revelation. Now, if you really want to uncover another uncomfortable secret from the magical world, click on this video right here. Why are goblins forbidden from using wands in Harry Potter? Trust me, The answer will change the way you see the ministry forever.